Okay, let me go ahead and get started. My name is AILA Lee from South Korea, and I feel very grateful to be part of this great symposium. And I want to thank all the organizers for their great work to put together this wonderful presenters. My title of presentation is "So You're Saying," formulating what the teacher said. One of the strengths of CAE is that it demonstrates some specific ways in which classroom interaction is organized and shaped in the course of interactions. And there are distinctive turn-taking in classroom with some structurally regular features. Through these regular features, instructional works are carried out. In these works, meanings are negotiated and knowledge is exchanged and questions are managed. My interest today is one such action through which meaning is negotiated and knowledge is shaped as part of instructional work through sense-making. One such action in classroom is found what's called a formulating practice. And according to Garfunkel and Sachs, formulating is this: a member may treat some part of the conversation as an occasion to describe that conversation, to explain it or characterize it, or explicate or translate or summarize, or furnish the gist of it, or take notes of its accordance with rules, or remark on its departure from rule. So formulating is happens when participants characterize what each other is doing during their interaction or exchange. This is sort of like a meta talk through which participants characterize or recast what was said in the previous turns. So let me give you an example. This is an ESL composition class at a US university. So we have a native speakers of English, native teachers of English, and an international students, undergraduate students. Here, the teacher has just explained a writing assignment, synthesizing, and one student named Jay had questions. Jay says, "My question is how to make thesis statement." It can be a little different. I mean, styles are different, depends on what kind of thesis statement: information paper, response paper, persuasion paper. Thesis statement a little different. For example, Toshiko, I don't like Toshiko because her behavior is not understandable. So this question is about a thesis statement. Now, as a teacher, we all know it is not difficult to explain what thesis statement is, its features. But it is quite difficult for students to see what it looks like in their own context of writing. So his question is quite complex. He's talking about all kinds of variations, different styles, and then he even included an example. I don't like Toshiko, and because her behavior is not understandable. This is drawn from one of the reading, assigned reading. To these questions in line 236, the teacher says that's more like a personal response type. And here she's characterizing or formulating Jay's remark. Then she offers her own example. Doing something like, some of the most important issues today are discussed in this article. We think issue X is most important. And then after a pause, teacher says, you are not giving a person like or dislike, you're kind of evaluating. And how much they talk about this, all this article, it must be important, and so on and so forth. So in line 243, she is formulating again. You're not giving a personal like or dislike, it's formulating in the J's example. And then she is formulating her own example. You're kind of evaluating, which is some of the most important issues today discussed in this article. The issue X is important. So She is formulating Jay's answer and then formulating her own answer. So as seen in this, formulation is used to offer different ways of seeing the instructional content. In other words, examples are cast in a different light. And the formulation in the classroom, Heyman said a while ago, formulating practices require members to examine and compare their own understanding of the talk and situation with that of others, retrospectively and prospectively. So there's something in this formulating practices in classroom, and we'll figure out what that is today. So particularly today, I'd like to talk about student formulations. My data shows cases in which students are formulating teachers' remarks, but I also included a formulating other students' remark in this data. So these formulations, formulating practice, they are part of sense-making works in which what happens is clarified and understood, which keeps the interaction moving forward. So let's take a look. The first data is again from the ESL composition course. In this class, the teacher has just explained the assignments, synthesizing. Here, the student M is formulating what the teacher has been saying about synthesizing later on. So let's read. Let's take a look. In line 119 and through 121, M says, "How can I, place the contrast in one body paragraph?" Or then, So the M's question in line 119 and 21 is about how to compare several reading materials in one body paragraph. To this, the teacher offers an instruction in line 126 and through 28. So 2 or 3 issues that are common in both of these articles, and discuss them in your response in your synthesis sections. Then J initiate repair 2, and the teacher says, yeah. Another student says yes. So, and the teacher responds 2 or 3 issues. She confirms. And then teacher offers additional information. You can compare and contrast the whole article. You're not summarizing them. Remember, Taeyong asked, we are summarizing these? No, you synthesize them. So here the teacher explains that not all content of the assigned reading can be summarized. She's explaining that summarizing the whole articles are not possible. That is to say, the teacher emphasizes why the assignment should be synthesizing, not summarizing. So now in the subsequent turn on line 136 and 137, M responds to the teacher by formulating what the teacher said in the prior turns. So we do that synthesis instead of summary. And the teacher acknowledges it in line 138. Now notice here that the M's formulation is a kind of summative remark of what the teacher has been saying all along. They need to pick 2 or 3 common issues in several assigned reading, and that's synthesizing, not summarizing. So by doing this, M is displaying his understanding of what the teacher has been doing all along. Namely, this assignment is about synthesizing, not summarizing. So M's formulation works as a confirmation check, but this confirmation comes through formulating what the teacher has been saying in a quite different light than what he had asked early on in line 119 and 921. So he understood. The next segment excerpt also shows student understanding of the teacher's remark with a little more active interpretations. Here, the teacher is talking about the last assignment her students were supposed to do, namely portfolio assignment. So in this assignment, the students were supposed to submit their writing samples. the question here is which writing samples they are supposed to submit. So Jay asked a question. So can I ask one more question? Yes. I want to ask about a portfolio. Okay, what's your questions about portfolio? So Jay's question was about which writing sample he is supposed to include in his portfolio. And in line 105, Jay says, if I choose like essay number 1, teacher says, and then Jay says, can I still choose essay number 3? This is an interesting question. It seems that by picking these two, he's trying to figure out which ones are eligible for the submissions. To this student, there ought to be some combinations of essays that are acceptable. So in the next turn in 108, the teacher responds, sure, and then pause, and sure. This is latched to a Jay's response. It doesn't matter. Now, the teacher didn't say it doesn't matter, but Jay's formulation tells us that he reads the teacher's answer that way. So Jay's formulation here shows that his formulation is referenced not just what was said, but how it was said. Sure and sure. Although Jay was particular about the selections of the assignments, selections about the samples, the teacher comments sure and sure led him to the conclusion that the selection is not limited, but open. Maybe he can pick essay number 1 and 2 and 4, or 1 and 4 and 6. Maybe adding other writing samples or something along those lines. Again, this formulation shows an interesting sense-making works that translate what the teacher meant, although the teacher did not say it that way in so many words. The last excerpt is another case of formulation. This time, one student, J, H, is formulating the remark by one of his classmates, J. Here, the teacher is talking about how to use citations in their writing. So she says, so if you use exact word, you might use quotation mark. If you change them, you don't use quotation mark, but you still need to give the name and the page number. Here, the teacher is differentiating direct quotation from paraphrasing. And quotation marks should be used for direct quotation. If it's just a paraphrasing, the name and page number would suffice. Then the student J in line 390 asks if this is about the first name of the author. So name is the first name. And then teacher says, yeah, for the purpose of this class, you're just gonna use last name or page number. Now notice that the part of Jay's question was overlapped, where Jay was talking about magazine in line 392. I assume that the name of the journals. So Jay in line 394, after accepting the teacher's answer last name, he repeats his questions about the magazine. So the main, I have to put the magazine name, and then after a pause, he repeats it again, magazine name or not. This prompts the teacher's repair and teacher's repair. So what name? And then Jay says magazine. But then teacher says you're gonna use either full or some. Now after this repair sequence, the teacher just didn't get it. And therefore she offers 2 examples, the last name of the 2 articles, full or some. Now this is where another student Y is intervening. One in line 4.1, 4.3. He says, I mean, he's asking you, if you read article from the magazine, then there's an author. This is interesting because in these formulations, Y is placing J's comment in such a way to highlight the word magazine. If you read an article, there's a magazine, then there's an author, so that the teacher can hear a magazine. So Y is formulating J's question in a way to clarify what prevented the teacher from hearing J's questions. Then the teacher says author's name. Now, the teacher noticed that what matters is not first versus last name, but something else is involved. So that's why he says the author's name. So a few repairs in line 4A, I'm not saying title, yeah, right, name, last name. That's settled. So a few repairs in line 4A, she emphasized the last name again. Probably that was, for this particular assignment. So in this data, White's formulation is designed to clarify what has been confusing to the teacher in Jay's remark. And White's formulation is designed to highlight the problem part to the teacher. And once this is settled, the interactions moves along. Okay, so far we have examined a few cases of student formulation in classroom interaction. And since formulation is drawn from prior terms, it is not something they can prepare in advance. They're improvised and thus contingent. Teachers' instructional remarks are often complex enough that requires a repetition, reformulation, and exemplification. To make the interactions going, students' understanding has to be demonstrated in some way. In this sense, students' formulation is sort of like an active way of sense-making work. This work influences the way the interaction proceeds, for example, clarifying what happens and moving interactions along. In this sense, formulating practices reveal particular ways of seeing and doing things. And it demonstrates how the participants shape what kind of knowledge matters and how, which is an important part of classroom interactions. Okay, that's all I prepare for the day, and thank you for listening.